NZTA, and also David Spears, the Regional Director for Relationships. Just checking to see whether we have Jess Andrew online. Jess Andrew is the Manager for Planning, Performance and Safety for NZTA. Good morning, Jess. Thank you. Nice to see you. David is going to kick away with his presentation. His suggestion is that we take a pause in the middle after a certain point in his presentation for questions, and then we'll continue with the second part and finish the questions afterwards. So I'll leave it in your hands. Thank you very much, David. Welcome.
Kia ora. Good morning, everybody. I'll whip through the more obvious parts of this presentation because it is quite long. There's quite a bit of detail in it, but if you've got the presentation if you want to catch up on the detail later. Roger, Jess and I will tag team through this, and Roger particularly will talk about the maintenance side of things when we get to it. Our intention, if this thing works, do I need to point behind me? Hey. Was really just to quickly set the scene around government priorities and the GPS. You'll all be aware of that by now, but it's really important context for the remainder of the kind of investment slides that we're going to talk about. Talk a little bit about the NLTP program coming up, and then what we've got in construction and kind of timeframes for completion. So in terms of GPS, Minister's been really, really clear, and anybody who's heard him speak will know that he reiterates these 4 priorities that have come from the government policy statement very, very clearly. And those priorities have driven a pretty big shift in the National Land Transport Plan and National Transport Fund from the last government. And that's meant that we have had some pretty big priority changes in terms of the investments that we were making, and that has impacted across the board, and including in Rotorua. Those priorities: economic growth and productivity, safety, value for money, including whole life costs. The Minister expresses that as no frills, but essentially do what you have to do to get the job done and nothing extra, and increase maintenance and resilience. That has played out in the way the activity classes that we operate under are funded. So just to be really clear, the way our funding works is we get allocated activity classes through the government policy statement. Those are them up on the screen for you. And each of those activity classes has a prescribed range of funding, a maximum and a minimum investment level that the board have to operate within. So in essence, government say to the board, you've got $2 billion for that activity class, or you've got $30 billion across the whole lot. You must spend within the range that we've given you for each activity class. And then the board have discretion in terms of the highs and lows, in terms of investment in those. Very, very strongly, government have prioritised state highway improvements and state highway maintenance. You'll see the pothole prevention fund, which in essence is Roger's baby in terms of maintaining the network. You'll see state highway operations. You'll see local pothole prevention and state highway improvements being funded quite high ranges, and also towards the top of the ranges by the board. That's come at a cost of other priorities, and that's the nature of the old graphic equaliser. You can't put one up without putting the other down, and that cost in terms of what we had in the last NLTP is largely around public transport infrastructure, some of the safety programs, and the climate emission reduction programs that we had, a lesser investment in walking and cycling relative to the previous NLTP. And again, that's played out in terms of the programs that we had perhaps forecasted that we thought were going to come up in the NLTP versus what has come up. So a lot of expenditure in that state highway maintenance, local road maintenance programs, much less in public transport infrastructure, safety, etc. So really just put that up there for context of what then has landed in the NLTP. Now, in terms of the wider Bay of Plenty, $1.9 billion of investment in the wider Bay of Plenty, $1.9 billion investment in the Waikato as well. So across those two areas, substantially some of the largest investments across the whole country. The vast, and you'll see up there the examples of what I talked about. 235 million of that is maintenance and operations investment, 412 million in the pothole investment class, 1.1 billion for improvements, 119 million for public transport investment, 2.5 million in safety investment, and 14.6 in walking and cycling. So you can see the highs and the lows very strongly in the outcome for the Bay of Plenty. One thing to, I guess, mention there is while some of those numbers around state highway investment are quite high, a lot of that is already committed. So it's committed by way of the roads of national significance, the roads of regional significance, and existing commitments in the Bay. So Takitimu Stage 1, for example. So there's very little new investment money there other than those roads of national significance, notwithstanding that it looks like a big number. What does that mean for us? So just a quick recap on what we have done in the 21-24 program. I'm not going to read through all of those, but you can see for a large investment in State Highway 30, as you'll all be aware, because you'll have been able to count the road cones for the last many years. State Highway 33, Tenai Junction, State Highway 5, Turakinga to Nongataha, safety improvements, and this sort of Rotorua urban investment around State Highway 30 and State Highway 5. So there's quite a lot been completed, and I thought it's just worth reflecting on the fact that we've completed quite a lot of work in the last 3 years. Might be a relief for a few people that those works are done. In construction, so we've still got a bit to finish, and this is that committed component. So notwithstanding there's a big chunk of money, a lot of it's committed, this is the committed component that we've got. So State Highway 30 Eastern Corridor, phase 1 funded and underway. Very much the focus is on supporting growth of that eastern Rotorua area and Wharenui. Construction's been split into the 3 zones, as you all know. We had $35 million funding cap, and you had $20 million funding cap from the COVID response fund, so $55 million all up. Just one thing to bear in mind, that is capped. There is no more money for that. And what that is meaning is, as we progress in the further slides, I'll talk about this, we are having to rescope the final phases of this project because of cost escalations and all of the things yourselves have grappled with, as well as that we've had to grapple with. But what we have done, zones 1 and 2, again, just in the interest of time, you guys know all of this, we've talked to you about this before, but there is quite a lot that has been completed, and I think we can all see the benefits of that work as we use that part of the corridor. Zone 3, and this is, I guess, a critical bit, is funded, so Wharenui Road. Our focus very much is on the Wharenui Road intersection and getting that to a place where we've got a signalised intersection, access to the medical centre, a wide shared path, so that we have improved safety around the intersection and pedestrian signals. We will be awarding that contract late this year, and we anticipate beginning work pretty much immediately in 2025. In terms of the Central Corridor, State Highway 30A, as you will all know by now, that was not funded in the NLTP. We had about a $5 billion shortfall between requested funding and available funding, and State Highway 30A Central Corridor was one of the casualties of that shortfall. So the works there will maintain our focus on that for the next NLTP period. So I think there's a bit of work there for us to do through the regional transport plan, but also the State Highway Improvement Plan, so that we can, one, undertake the revocation works and have that revocation completed, but we will have to progress it through the next NLTP. Roger. Oh, actually, let's just pause there. Roger's going to talk about maintenance and operations stuff. So if there's specific questions about what I've just talked about, happy to answer them.
Thank you, David.
Or Jess
yeah.
is equally there.
Sure. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you very much. Just a question on the comment you made regarding the cost escalations that required the project to be rescoped. Could you give us some idea of what those are, please?
So as a consequence of COVID and the impact of COVID across globally, actually, we, for example, saw a 60% increase in the cost of steel, cement. Those have stabilised now, but during the period we were delivering a lot of this work, there were just massive increases in materials, freighting costs. And whilst I say those are stabilised, they still haven't returned to pre-COVID levels. They probably never will. But because this budget was struck with Crown Infrastructure Partners as part of the COVID recovery and it was capped, we don't have any room within the budget to say, oh, look, we've had cost escalations, can we have 20% more? And we don't have the ability to take that money from the NLTP either, so we don't have an alternative funding source. So that's meant we've had to rescope in terms of what we can deliver in those final phases.
Thank you. So what's the impact of that? When you say rescope, what is that going to look like? So the impact of that is
we're focusing, and Jess, you might be able to talk to the detail. She's gone. Perfect. The impact of that is that we will focus very much on the roundabout improvement, so that we can make, because that's the biggest safety outcome, and I don't want to call them the nice to have component. They're not really nice to have. They're pretty critical, but we won't be able to deliver. Will be the footpath upgrades, etc. That we would have delivered. We're having to rescope those out of the project. Potentially for future delivery through NLTP processes, but we'll have to. That's part of the conversation we'll have to have through the Regional Transport Plan and the NLTP as it comes up for the next round.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Was there any other questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, there's no further money for Rotorua in this next 3 years. We get that, it's nice and clear. But I have real concerns about the increased traffic outside Waipa, the development of the Peka Block Industrial Park, and how all of that interacts with the state highway, increasing mountain bike traffic. That's becoming quite a hub for tourists. Is there room to override budgets when you see a genuine safety concern, or how does that work? Can you explain
that? The short answer is no, and the reason I say that is there literally is no extra money set aside for just in case projects, but what we have got is a very ambitious delivery program because of the swing towards significant investment in highway infrastructure and maintenance. There's a lag in terms of our delivery, our ability to deliver, our ability to tool up and actually do all of that work because it's so ambitious. It's quite possible that what that means is that in the early part of the NLTP and potentially even later into the NLTP period, there will be money that's not spent because programs won't get delivered, potentially. We're not starting out with the view that they won't get delivered, but that's any project manager will tell you that that's the potential. So there is potential later in the NLTP that there will be money that hasn't been delivered on core projects that we will be able to bring a focus to other priorities. Whether this one would stack up, I don't know, but that's part of the reason why we need to continue doing the work to establish the business case for those works that didn't get funded so that if that does eventuate, and it has happened in the past, it's why when we rank projects, we rank them as probable, possible, probable and possible, because the probables will, those are the ones we're going to fund. The possibles are, if money became available, this is probably a good project to chuck some money at. So I'm not going to say absolutely no, but at the moment, on the face of it, there's no extra money.
Okay, you can tell your hierarchy that Councillor Brown thinks that that's a real issue, for what that's worth. Another question, if I may, Madam Chair. I understand Rotorua has an agreement with NZTA around Connect Rotorua. It was going back in 2016. How will that progress, and have you got a date on that?
Yeah, so that's our 30A project that hasn't been funded in the NLTP process. How will that progress? As I say, that's something we need to take through to the next NLTP and make a case for that to be delivered. We simply won't be progressing revocation of that part of the network until that's complete. So it's a priority for us to get that funded. Unfortunately, in the current NLTP, it didn't get funded, but it doesn't mean we're taking our eye off it. We're very conscious it still needs to be delivered. It's a matter of timing.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Thank you very much, David and Roger, for being here to present this. It's always great to do this in person. You noted in your presentation that a total of $1.9 billion is forecast to be invested in the Bay of Plenty. Naturally, as leaders of Rotorua, we are extremely concerned that we make up 20% of the Bay of Plenty region population, but we've essentially been allocated nothing. I'm quite concerned that the $1.9 billion may just be being sucked up by the bigger cities. There are plenty of other smaller towns within the Bay of Plenty region that are missing out as well. And I just wonder if there is any reason why equity is not being considered across the region in this case for investment allocated.
So the prioritisation process that we used does not have a population-based, you shall invest 20% because Rotorua is 20%. It has, and this again is a reflection of the GPS, an imperative around the investments that government consider to be those that will achieve the greatest economic benefit for the region as a whole, the greatest safety outcomes, those four key criteria, prioritising maintenance and operations. In terms of the large-scale investments, State Highway 29, the roads of national significance, so State Highway 29, Tauriko, Takitumu Stage 1 completion, Takitumu Stage 2 in this part of the region, account for a very significant chunk of that $1.9 billion. If you then add on maintenance and operations, which I would say will reflect need across the region and is quite, and Roger can talk to this a little bit, is quite well spread across the region. That accounts for almost all of the rest. So in terms of a maintenance and operations outcome, I would say that does reflect pretty well a spread across the region. In terms of those really large bits of infrastructure, you can only build one or two, so it's impossible to build those, across the whole region. And as you'll appreciate, Takitumu 1 and 2 will account, or the remainder will account for almost $1 billion of that $1.9 billion alongside. Look, I've heard a lot of, Tauranga put up a lot of bids and Tauranga got a lot. Actually, Tauranga wanted 5 very large pieces of infrastructure, they got 1. So that perception, I think, is probably not quite right. It's simply that they're very large, very expensive projects. And you can, as I say, you can only build 1 or 2. But yeah, your point is taken. There isn't currently at least, there isn't a process that says, hey, 20% of the taxpayers sit here, 20% of the distribution should go here. It doesn't work that way.
Thank you. And economically, Rotorua contributes significantly in terms of GDP to our region, and we have continuously noted our disappointment that the areas of Waipa and also the airport that are primed and ready to go for economic development have still not been supported. The next question I do have is, some time ago, the Rotorua Lakes Council lifted the designation for the Eastern Arterial Route. This was hugely significant. It was part of work that was in collaboration with the wider region as well, but there was an anticipation that the lifting of that would then result in investment from NZTA. I appreciate that every time this plan is considered, there are new priorities, but it seems that Rotorua is continuing to miss out despite what was certainly perceived as promises of investment based on those decisions. I just wonder if NZTA does have a response on why that has been so delayed. That was a hugely significant decision. That Eastern Arterial Route, I believe, had been designated for 50 years before we decided to lift it to make sure that we can keep up with how fast our population, but also our economy was growing.
Absolutely appreciate the history behind that and the undertakings. I hate saying this, but NZTA are the delivery agency. These are conversations for ministers and the ministry around those priorities and what does or doesn't end up in the investment priority matrix that we use to make our investment decisions, and what does and doesn't end up in the government policy statement. They're very large, very political conversations that I would encourage you to be having with your members, and being very pointed about the fact that what ends up in the GPS and what ends up in the investment priority method that we get given determines the outcomes.
Thank you, and apologies, I should have given the year. It was in 2016, so it will be 10 years since that decision was made, and we still would not have seen the results, but I take your feedback on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Tab. So I've got a question from Councillor Kai Fong, and then Councillor Wang online, and then we'll move on, I think, for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm just following on from the Mayor's comment around the airport. That's something that we've now agreed to fund.
Yes.
So just checking that you are largely supportive and of us proceeding with that, and will do everything you can to help us enable that, because it's both a safety concern from exiting the airport, turning right back into the city, as well as that wider economic development opportunity for the airport land.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think notwithstanding that we are not in a position to build the ultimate solution there, the roundabout, we are, I think, demonstrably behind you doing what you need to do, and I think we've enabled that to date as much as we can, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, thanks. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Councillor Wang online. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, I support the questioning from Mayor Tapsell and Councillor Brown, and my question will be along the similar lines, really just around the lack of funding and priority. I think that northwestern Rotorua is seeing, or is not seeing. I know that about 4 years ago there was quite a bit of work done into the design for the Nongata village, for the upgrades there, and obviously, you know, we don't see any of that here in the NLTP. So I just wonder again, you know, if you have a response to that, because I know that, you know, with the FDS, with the planned housing and economic growth in that area and further out, there's already significant congestion there. There's already safety concerns through the village. And I think the residents are quite concerned about the lack of movement in that area. So I don't know if you have a response to any of that.
Other than the fact that we're aware of those issues, obviously, they are, again, they are needs that we are aware of. They are needs that need to be prioritised in the NLTP, and in this case, the investment wasn't wasn't funded. I would simply say this is, again, it's something I encourage you to keep at the forefront of the regional transport planning process. If it's not in there, it won't get funded. That's the bottom line. If it is in there, it might not get funded, but at least it's in there. So I think, you know, having a very sophisticated case for that funding going forward is really important. Will it get funded? I don't know. It depends on what else comes up in the priority. And for us this time around, and unfortunately this was the same last time around, although it was worse this time, you know, the timing of the GPS meant that we had a whole lot of assumptions made around what may or may not get funded. That simply didn't, because the GPS was quite different from what had come before. So, yep, look, really aware of the issues. I'll be honest, every other large growing city in the country is saying the same thing. You know, I can go to Hamilton, in fact I did, day before yesterday, had the same conversation. My answer to them was the same. We need to keep the story and the case for that investment in the investment process, in the NLTP and the RLTP, so that when the opportunity does come and the priorities are of the GPS reflect that investment, it will get funded.
Thank you, David. Thank you, councillors, for your questions. Is there anything else, Councillor Wayne? Yes.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just one more quick one, if I may. My second question was just around the I guess the preload sites, your material sites around the district. Some of them are being used as school bus stops, you know, whether rightly or wrongly they are and have been used as, you know, I guess de facto school buses for quite a while now. I've been contacted by many parents and schools about the safety concerns that they have with those sites. And I just wonder what your relationship is with the Ministry of Education and any other party, I guess, in terms of those situations, because those kids are being dropped off in those sites where there are heavy machinery operating. You know, it is on the edge of a state highway, you know, situations like that. So again, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add for that.
Yeah, we have an improving relationship with the Ministry of Education, is what I would say. Ministry of Education are actually the biggest public transport provider in the country by quite a margin, and so they have a really high level of complexity in terms of their network. We are improving the relationship, and historically it hasn't been that spectacular. And those are the kind of conversations that we're having at a very operational level with them. It's fair to say that you know, the more feedback we get about those sites, because you know, we don't necessarily know about those sites. So when we do get feedback from those, it's a conversation that Roger and his team, or even myself, can be having with Ministry of Transport folks, and making sure that, you know, their primary goal has got to be safety first. So if there are sites where, for example, we're planning to open up and work, and we had this on the Coromandel just over the anniversary weekend events, we will sit down and have a conversation with them.
Thank you, David. And
Thank you.
I think Councillor Wang is thinking about one particular site on the northern side of Rotorua that we might need to talk to you about.
We're welcome to receive that. Happy to receive that feedback.
Thank you. And thanks very much for your answers. I'll hand over to Roger now. You're going to do the maintenance side of things.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mayor Tapsell, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to come have a chat today. Appreciate it. It's always nice to be here in person. I'd start by saying that in terms of the maintenance and operations, we do have some regional discretion as to where we place the funds. And I can say with absolute confidence that this area is fairly represented based on needs of the pavement rather than policy settings. So that's a positive. I hope you agree that the general condition of the state highways around Rotorua is improving. So I'm really positive for that as a starting point, and long may that continue. That's definitely the plan. I guess in terms of the government policy statement, for context, road pavement life is finite and it gets consumed in simple terms by heavy vehicles. So the emphasis on potholes is the pavement deterioration. When it reaches potholes, it's a clear sign that you actually need to fix the underlying problem. So the good news is the government actually taken that on board and given absolute clear and ring-fenced direction that you will spend funds as appropriate to ensure that the pavement itself is renewed, rather than, I guess, holding treatments, for want of a better label.
Just, does everybody understand what Roger means by pavement?
Sorry, David. I suffer from engineering bias. I apologise.
So this is a thing I learned when I joined NZTA from Doc and went, what are you talking about? So pavement is not the stuff on the top, right? It's not the icing on the cake. The pavement is the actual stuff underneath. It's the cake underneath. So when you get a pothole, it's actually a crack in the icing that has meant the cake, if you like, the underlying stuff has started to come out, and you can't repair that by just putting more icing on top. So when Roger says we're talking about pavement work, it's expensive because you're actually ripping the top off and repairing the actual underlying component of the road, and that's the expensive bit. Then putting a decent seal back on and maintaining that seal, that's maintenance. Rehabilitation is essentially that. Let's fix the cake underneath. I'm sorry, that's a really basic analogy, but I often, people just look and I think, I don't know if you know what Roger's talking about. So,
Most helpful, thank you.
David, thank you. Sorry, apologies. I live in a microcosm of technical people, so I'll endeavour to shift my language a little. Sorry, I'll just reset my brain now. So picking up on David's analogy, if water gets in the cake, it turns the cake into a mess, right? So one of the emphasis of the GPS is actually we've got to keep water out of the, I nearly said pavement again, we've got to keep water out of the construction of the road. Because if you can think about it in simple terms, if water's in something and the truck drives on it, you can't compress water, right? So that energy has to go somewhere, and that's what deteriorates the cake or blows the road pavement out. So for context, those funds I think are very necessary. From a road maintenance point of view, I'm really pleased that that's been included. But as David said at length, it has been at the expense of a whole lot of other things. You know, walking and cycling has been severely cut. As the Minister refers to as nice to have things are no longer on the agenda. So it's really coming back to basics, which again for me is really positive. But from an aesthetic point of view, you might see a slight deterioration in things. But in terms of actually keeping the roads functional and pothole-free, there's been great emphasis on that. As a bit of a summary, 52 kilometres of icing replacement, 9.2 kilometres of cake baking. So that's pretty cool. Now these works have in fact started. I know that we've started on Sala Street, which is good. So these are the cake replacements of the programme for this year. And we're on schedule, we're tracking well, and weather permitting, we're very confident of completing this programme this year. Think of potholes as the canaries in the coal mine. The more potholes we get, the worse the underlying road condition is. So by measuring the potholes, it gives us clear intent on how well we're managing the underlying condition. And there has been emphasis to replacing or filling the potholes, in essence, replaces the icing layer. So two benefits, stopping the water getting into the road, but also improving the ride quality. And there are daily meetings reporting on this in the maintenance operations team across the country. So it is, in fact, clear and present emphasis from the Minister, who pays great attention to these statistics. So far we're tracking well. We're above or on the 95% and certainly above the 85% on the low classification roads. And that's our M&O summary. Happy to take questions through the chair, of course.
Thank you, Roger. Is there any questions, councillors? Councillor Patterson, then Councillor Maxwell.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair. Mine doesn't relate to the conversation we've had so far. Should I wait till everybody else has had their turn?
If you wouldn't mind, that's great.
Thank
you, Councillor. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, gentlemen. In the explanation you gave about the pothole situation. Is there a kind of, Rotorua is unique geothermal. Is any, if it goes into the fact some of this might take that into account with the things you're deciding on? Thank you.
Councillor, it's a good question, and yes, we do. We take into account the geology of whatever road we're looking to maintain. So in this case, yes, we take these things into account. Other areas have got different challenges. So yes, it is the short answer.
Thank you. Councillor Waru?
Tēnā koe te chairman, and apologies again for lateness. School holidays. Hoi anō. Morena, thank you. I've been following the kōrero online, so I wouldn't get left behind. However, so I think thank you for the explanation around the potholes and all that, because that's always a hot topic. But my question is around the speed in which they're dealt with. What's the scenario? Sometimes it seems like it takes a long time. Sometimes it doesn't. If you could expand on that, that would be good to know. Thank you.
Well, the scenario is, if we know about it, we're directed to fix it within 24 hours. That's a clear direction. Where it sometimes gets a little muddled is that if people don't tell us and it doesn't sit in our system, because we've got people looking at our roads on a regular basis, but we can't look at every piece of road every day. So I guess the message is if people can actually phone us, we're going to under number 4 highways, give us a call, register the pothole, then it should, 95% of the time, is being fixed within 24 hours.
Thank you.
Just on that, just another issue. It's much easier to fix a pothole on a warm summer's day when the ground temperature's high and tar sticks and things. It's in the dead of winter when it's -4 degrees and it's been raining for the last 3 days. It's incredibly hard to patch a pothole. So people get a bit oha when they see us go out and patch a pothole, and 4 days later it's blown out again. The simple reason for that is the surface needs to stick. And it doesn't stick very well on water, and it doesn't stick very well when it's cold. So this is why you see our programs are very concentrated on summer. Ground temperature 18 degrees and above is sort of optimal.
Well, 18 and above is optimal. 12 is basically a minimum, but the black stuff doesn't stick very well if it's less than 12 degrees ground temperature.
So that's why you see a lot of short-term fixes over autumn and winter. And then we come back and do the sort of larger scale fix. People often say, you were just here a month ago. Well, yeah, that's because a month ago it was wet and not sticky, and now it is.
So do the sticky plaster fix and then come and do the surgery. Kia ora. Thank you for the explanation. I think that would be quite handy information for a lot of our people ready to understand. Because I think they just go and post it up online or something, and then it just has a big kōrero, i.e. the flower pothole bandit or vigilante or something like that. You might want to have a bit of a kōrero about that one. Okay. Now the NZTA stuff, just wondering what the policy is around main bus routes, or are there any policies that pertain to those particular roads?
We don't dictate the bus routes. Ministry for Education set the bus routes based on population demographic and the schools that they're serving. They consult with us on whether there are any significant safety issues that go with this. To Councillor Wang's point, it's something that we're working to improve, but yeah, we don't dictate those bus routes.
What about public bus routes?
Public transport is
obviously with regards to the roads.
Yeah, whilst we're a funder, again, we're not the manager of those routes. So regional council manage the service and hence the routing, and yourselves actually fund the infrastructure that goes with that. So whilst many might say that's not a perfect system, it is the system that we've got. So no, we don't again dictate that.
Thank you very much, and I hope you do follow up on the flower vigilante. Quite interesting. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Wadu. No other questions, councillors? I'll just go to Councillor Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I guess it actually carries on from Councillor Wadu's point. I was at a tātou pōnamu hui a couple of months ago, I think it was now, and the question about the bus stop on Tenai Road opposite the Ngāpuna shops was raised. It's all very well for people coming out of town and getting off on the side of the road that it's nice and safe, but to go across that road to get a bus to go into town for the people of Ngāpuna is extremely dangerous. So how did that even get approved to be in that spot? It's kind of odd.
I have literally no idea. Sorry, I can't answer that.
That's possibly a question for our team, I'd say.
Possibly one for the regional council or your team, yeah.
We can find that information for you, councillor.
Thank you.
No other questions, councillors? Well, thank you very much, David and Roger. I appreciate you coming in today and running through this presentation for us and providing such useful information, even though it's not possibly welcome in some cases in our situation. I'd also just like to note, David, that we may not see you again in this capacity here. I believe you're moving on to a new role. So just want to wish you all the best for that, and thank you for your time coordinating and communicating with us at Rotorua Lakes Council. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us, and yeah, wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, councillors, we'll move on to item number 7 now, which is the staff reports. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? We're on page 21. That the report Civil Defence Emergency Management recommendation to appoint additional alternate local controller be received, please. That's Councillor Kai Fong and then seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you, and I just invite Stavros to overview his report. Thank you, Stavros.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena tatu katoa. I will take the report as read. Just would like to remind elected members that Council has a statutory responsibility to be prepared for and respond to a civil defence emergency. In order to do that, we have to maintain a significant number of our staff trained and meeting all the accreditation requirements under the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Act, including controllers. Controllers in a declared emergency are really the chief executives of the Emergency Operations Centre. We do try to maintain constantly a cadre of at least 4 trained, fully trained controllers to enable constant rostering. We've been fortunate enough that recent times Paul Warbrick, who has joined us recently, has a significant portion of that training under his belt and some experience, part of his previous knowledge and employment conditions. And we require elected members' approval to nominate Paul Warbrick to be inserted and agreed by the Joint Committee of the Regional Civil Defence Establishment as one of our controllers to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Does anyone have any questions regarding this report? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros. Just a question regarding Mr. Warbrick with his responsibilities. I understand he's already got a lot on his plate, but this new set of responsibilities, will that include connecting with marae around the Rohe to work with them to enable them to become evacuation points, specialised centres for dealing with civil defence emergencies, etc.? Will he be a part of that liaison group to get them up to speed?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. The answer is yes and no. Under his current role as a Tiamorangi manager, that's his role, part of his role to connect to marae with mana whenua and hapu with regards to achieving readiness in conjunction with our own community engagement team within the Emergency Operations Centre. In the hopefully unlikely event where you have to declare an emergency, civil defence an emergency, The role of the controller is not to directly engage with communities. The role of the controller is direct the response and the action plans of the emergency operation team. But within the emergency operations center, there are members of the Tia Morangi team that have got a constant connectivity with Hapu and Marae and all the communities in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? That seems to be that. Thank you very much, Stavros, for that report. And I'd now like to ask for a mover for the recommendation. So we have Councillor Waru will move the motion that the committee endorses the nomination of Paul Walbrook, Manahotu Te Aroa Partnerships, to the appointment of an alternate local controller. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brown is a seconder. I'll now open up for a round of discussion if there is any. Do the movers want to have anything to say about that? Thank you.
Yes, kia ora. No, pretty straightforward. I know he's quite capable of doing these things given his background, leadership roles he's held, military service, all that. So this is just, it's a good fit, and he's perfectly well placed to carry this out. And it's an important part. And although Stavros has given us, has indicated that his role is not to communicate or engage directly with marae and iwi, I believe there's already a program in place that's doing that. I can attest to that because my own marae, or one of my own marae, Te Koutou, is part of that whole thing there for emergency hubs, community hubs. So, kia ora tātou, let's get on board.
Kia ora, thank you. Any other discussion? Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just want to acknowledge that for many of our staff, this is a volunteer role that's outside of their usual business, their business as usual roles, and they do take the time to make sure that they are trained and ready to respond if necessary. So I think it is fantastic that we've got someone such as Paul to join the already very capable and passionate team. And I do just want to acknowledge that we have a significant amount of our staff, I think it's a quarter of all of our staff, is it, that are actually trained and ready to respond if there's a civil defence emergency, which I think is very positive for Rotorua in general. So I just want to acknowledge all of our staff doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. There appear to be other speakers, and we're very lucky to have Paul as a member of our team, and now he'll be adding extra value across the civil defence management as well. So I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. The next item on the agenda is 7.2, the Parawai Rising Main Long-Term Plan Funding Adjustment. That's on page 24 of your agendas, councillors. Could I have a mover and seconder that the report Parawai Rising Main Long-Term Plan Funding Adjustment be received, please? Moved by Councillor Kiropa and seconded by Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. I'll leave it with Stavros to overview this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the report as read. I believe the report contains the parts of information required by elected members to make a decision on this on those recommendations. I would like to note a couple of areas. This has been a difficult decision making by us as officers to come back to you with the recommendations in front of you. And the reason for that, obviously, when we're doing long-term infrastructure strategy forecasting, we do try to focus as best as we can, the forward needs of our networks. And having said that, obviously, forecasted needs are always based on modelling and information that relates to the time of the long-term planning. However, we do have a significant responsibility to continue to evaluate emerging risks, as we best know it, in the light of new information, and evaluate those risks against possible consequences if they occur, and review and reevaluate our earlier projections of various programs of works. This is one of them. The assessment of this request to elected members to agree to the recommendations in front of you is been based on the fact that If that almost 4 kilometers of pressure pipe that connects Hamurana, Nongotaha, and into the city for the conveyance of wastewater to the treatment plant fails suddenly, there are a number of risks and consequences that we need to be and we are aware of. Of course, one is that compliance and regulations risks. I have reported to elected members earlier that back in August 2023, the natural built environment compliance regulations have increased penalties for breaches of unconsented discharges into the environment for entities like the Rotorua Lakes Council from $1 million to $10 million. So that's a financial risk. Second risk is that if the pipeline fails in an uncontrolled manner, the service reliability connecting Hamurana communities and Nongotaha communities into the city will be severely disrupted, and the repairs are not easy to be achieved. There is also a significant risk of pollution. The pipeline carries about 1,250 cubic meters of wastewater each day into the city, and obviously that's fugitive wastewater will have an environmental impact. And the fourth risk is that we do have a number of land development proposals that are taking place in Nongotaha and in the vicinity of Kutu, in the parameters of this pipeline, which in the absence of a reliable pipeline to connect them to 200 houses in Nongotaha and another 200 units near Somerset development, we would not be able to consent them because the risk is high for this pipeline to fail. We have also identified in the report there is a financial risk because we have anticipated that work to take place in subsequent years, especially mainly in 26, 27, and 27, 28. And in recent tests we've done onto the pipe through core sampling, this is an asbestos cement pipe that was installed in the 1980. The walls of those pipes are becoming thinner and thinner. And it gives me, as a chief engineer, a significant concern that I cannot predict the performance and reliability of the pipeline beyond the current events. It may last, but the possibility of failure and the consequences are too high, and therefore I'm in a position where I cannot assure elected members that I will have continuity and reliability of the service. So we signal also there's some financial costs, bringing forward expenditure incurs a premature finance cost for this work, but comparing that to the consequences of failure, we think that the probability and the consequences of the financial risks versus the other risks outlined earlier justifies the recommendations in front of you, and we request your permission to realign our investment profile from the next 2 years into the next in 27, 28 and 28, 29. 26, 27, 27, 28 to 24, 25 and 25, 26. So we'll appreciate your consideration and happy to take any questions on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, Stavros. So just a couple of quickies. The Nongotaha pipeline, I guess you could call it that. Will that be the new pipe? Will it be of the same quality and standard as the one that's proposed to be put in near Rotorua?
Yes, sir. I think the current pipeline is a 375 millimeter internal diameter AC pipe. It will be replaced with a PE pipe, which has got a life expectancy between 75 and 100 years. We do not intend to remove the pipe, the existing pipe. We will leave it in place because in the future we may duplicate that by pipe bursting, inserting another pipe inside it. But at the moment, but the new material will be PE with a 75 to 100 year life expectancy.
So will it have a sleeve as well, like we're talking about for giving extra strength? No. Okay. No. So at previous meetings we've discussed the wastewater system out Nongotaha Way with loading it up with the Watchman Capital Development, and I was pretty much given assurances that there's no issue with our wastewater system. Adding those 200 extra homes won't be a problem. So has something changed between when we initially looked at that development to now? Have you just realised that this is going to be an issue?
No, nothing's changed. I think just we need to be very careful when you're talking about, and I know the words is no issues. The capacity of the system can accommodate the current and projected development in all of the catchments for the next 30 years. Our infrastructure strategy models that and is very clear about it. However, I will remind elected members that our infrastructure strategy also identifies out of the 600 kilometers of pipelines that serve the wastewater system, a significant number of them are near to or are at the end of their design life. I think what is unpredictable is the accuracy of what the end of that design life is. And as I said earlier in my introduction, we have made reasonable assumptions that the design life of this pipe would be completed by 26, 27. However, we continue to do detailed assessment of the condition of the pipes, and sometimes we have to bring them slightly forward. So there's no issue with the capacities, no issue with treatment. There is issue with the condition of some of our pipes. And again, that is the reason why we focus most of our attention into our renewals of wastewater systems on the 20% of our critical pipelines. And I think that's a subject matter we have discussed many times as part of the LTP, the infrastructure strategy. So I would like to reinforce the view that the wastewater system is adequate to treat wastewater for the next 30 years as we can forecast it. However, there are pipelines that the accuracy of predictive failure has to be continuously tested, and this is one of the occasions.
Thank you for that. Just one more question. So last Wednesday, we were told that our debt was sitting at 418 million. So according to the LTP, it was going to be around about 400 million at this point. So we've just gone over a bit. So this will push us up to 420 million. Am I right in reading that? And then, so that's 20 million above what was shown in the LTP. 25, 26, the forecast was 450 million or thereabouts. So that'll take it to 455. 26, 27, close to 500 million, so we'll be adding another 2.5 to that if I read this information correctly. So I know that's probably not your area of specialty, Stavros, but what impact will this have on the ratepayers?
I think I might ask Thomas to answer that question, please, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. By bringing this project forward, it brings forward planned borrowings that are in the LTP forward. And so there is no overall change to the overall debt of council going forward, but as a result of this, the rates will go up a little bit higher than anticipated in response to this project being brought forward.
And if I might also add to you, Madam Chair, what was reported in the council meeting was the total debt, not the net debt. And as the CFO explained at the time, the reason that debt was higher is because we took advantage of a pre-funding of loan agreements that allowed us to take advantage of arbitrage and gain for the ratepayer. So we just need to be clear that the kaupapa that we had at the council meeting last week, where we talked about total debt, that is a deliberate change from the long-term plan. It's not a change in net debt because we were holding those reserves on deposit. This would be a change. It would be a shift in the debt profile. It wouldn't be a change in the total debt over time. Just to be clear. So
just to clarify, the ratepayers won't see an increase other than what we've told them that was in the LTP. They won't see an increase because of this.
Through you, Madam Chair, as we've outlined in the report, because you bring it forward, the cost of servicing that debt will land in a year earlier, but it'll also be relieved a year earlier. So over the long-term projection, there isn't a net change, it shifts by a year.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Kaifong, you had a question.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think mine just sort of followed on from Councillor Patterson's, and it was just really a question then whether or not we equalise this by shifting something else out, because we're bringing this forward. So is there another project that can go out so that we keep it? Because if you, am I misreading the page 27? So where it talks about the increase in finance costs, the net increase is about 379,000 if you take off the pluses and minuses?
I'll leave that to the CE to address.
I'll try and provide a simple explanation rather than a complicated one, but if we need more information, we can ask the CFO. So the table outlines the debt profile over the long-term plan years, but the actual debt is much longer than that. So over the total life of the debt, there is no change to the ratepayers. So it isn't that while this table looks like it's worse off, over the total borrowing, it isn't any worse off. It's just shifting it by a couple of years. And the reasons for that, the reason that is a recommendation from Stavros as the chief engineer and me as the chief executive is when I consider on balance the risk of deferring this work, given the information we now have, versus the net effect of not ultimately changing the expenditure, but just bringing it forward in order to alleviate risk. That's the basis on which, from both a financial, a reputational, from an environmental and a cultural point of view, I would recommend this investment be brought forward.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Kaifong? Or have you got further?
To have this conversation offline to just understand the mathematics a little bit more.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell, you had a question?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. Well, I am supportive of bringing this forward because there are obvious risks, but also obvious opportunities for making sure that we invest in this. It does just raise a bigger question around if we know that there is a significant amount of our assets that are reaching the end of their life, at some stage all of them will land on us and all of them will need a way to be funded. So I do support Councillor Kaifong's suggestion of we're going to have to find balance here to make sure that the overall burden on ratepayers of shifting around of these significant and necessary investments do not fall too heavy on one single financial year. But I did just have a question regarding the timing of this, because I do note in the report that in 2010, a condition assessment of this critical pipeline was carried out, and the results of that were indicated that the pipeline had an estimated remaining life of around 15 years, which is already falling on us now. So while we are having to urgently and immediately shift it, there's potentially was information that would have been required in this time period anyway. So it's just a question around timing. I know that these are estimates and we always work to the best of the knowledge of the technology and assessments that we do have. But could this have been preempted that it needed to be shifted forward anyway previously, either in the 2010 condition assessment or the following 2022 condition assessment, which indicated a heightened risk of failure from 2024 onwards, which again we're in now?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would totally concur, with your, with those concerns. However, I would like to remind again elected members that when you look into your infrastructure strategy, which you have recently adopted in the 2024-34, it clearly identifies a large segment of our pipelines or our networks are at or near their end of design lives. And we do continuously assess the highest priorities, and especially we're giving a lot of emphasis into the critical components of their network. I would frank that the accuracy or predictive failure of any component of the network, with 100%, precision is really an impossibility. And therefore, we do try our best and to meet those requirements and invest our renewal and our rehabilitation limited funds in the areas where we have the most effect and the highest risk. I think in the past I have signaled in a simile, we say it is like every year I have one bullet and 50 targets to hit as a chief engineer. And the reality is that with that investment we make every year, the scope and the magnitude of works we need to predict and address is always challenging, but I appreciate the elected members' support on the criticality of this piece of work, and especially in addressing the identified risks in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana. Kia ora, Stavros. Thank you for the report. And I think it just you know, it's a sensible way to look at it. And obviously you're the authority on these things. So, you know, we're moving on this recommendation. Well, I feel I will support it. Just wanted to ask, on the map, the pipeline, is that following the train track and the road? But I noticed and it's a little elbow.
Yeah.
Is that the riding for the disabled block, Waikuta?
Beg your pardon?
The on the map, there's Long Street and then there's an elbow at this. It turns and it's on a block. I'm just trying to ascertain what block that is. Right at the end.
Bonington's, you know.
Pardon?
The Bonington block.
No. There's I think it's opposite.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I can help, I'm very sure that is that block. Yes.
Kapai, are there any have the people at the riding for the disabled been notified of this, or will they be notified, I suppose, around these?
Anybody who will be affected by these works will be notified, Councillor Waru. It's a standard operational practice that if we believe anybody is going to be impacted by the works, you know, obviously we'll have to notify them.
Thank you. Does the council have any kind of agreement in place or anything like that with that particular block in terms of maintenance and things like that, just out of interest?
Look, I cannot give you a precise answer at this point, but generally, if you have utilities and services that require access to through easements or servicing and so on, there are always agreements with with landowners to make sure that the easement agreements are in place.
Thank you, Stavros. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, Stavros. I think, like Councillor Patterson and Councillor Kaifong, and I think you alluded to it in your opening statements, we're barely 3 months on from adopting the LTP, and effectively you're asking us to put up the rates next year on the basis of possible risk. Also on the basis of the housing development at Nongataha would be put at risk, and the housing development at Somerset would be put at risk. Shouldn't, where are we at? Are those developments, have they both been consented?
They have, or they're in the process of being consented. Well, the Nogota has been consented. The Somerset is in the process of the fast tracking at the moment to be consented. So, yeah. But we impose engineering conditions to that.
So shouldn't this have been considered when it was consented?
Councillor Oli, can I emphasize this is not a new pipe. This is an existing pipe that needs renewal. Last week, we have presented to you the KPIs for the 23-24 financial year, the non-financial KPIs which are required to adhere to in meeting certain performance expectations in all our networks, our sewage network, the water network, the transport network, the stormwater network, and if you recall, they are all green. We cannot achieve green KPIs, that means meeting our KPIs, if we don't effect timely and effective renewal of our networks. So I'm not able to link land developments and additional demand onto our pipelines, have an expectation that those networks are in place, are in a position to actually connect to our networks. All I'm saying to you is that the condition of this pipeline is at a stage where we need to renew it a couple of years earlier than we anticipated in order to mitigate risks. And one of those risks is those land development proposals. of the consenting of land development proposals. So the two things are not really, we're not putting new pipe into place that didn't exist. It's a pipe that we have an obligation to continue to renew to maintain its safety and reliability. And that's what we're doing at this point in time.
Thank you. I'll just get the CE to add something else to Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I'm hearing from the questions that maybe these two issues are somewhat getting conflated. So if I can just clarify, hopefully clarify what Stavros has said in this presentation. The renewal timeframe for the pipe is a function of the age and condition of the pipe. As Her Worship mentioned, we have had advice over time about what that predicted life would be. That prediction inherently carries risk and uncertainty. And as we get more information about the life of the pipe, our predictions of the relative risk of when it might fail and our acceptability of that changes with time. And what assessment we're making at this point is that where it was forecast, we propose bringing it forward. So that's one issue. Separate to that, if we've got a pipe that we think is a year or two away from being renewed because it's at end of life, it isn't prudent to connect new connections into it because that adds an element of risk. We would prefer, from an asset management and maintenance perspective, to have them connect into a new pipe and therefore have reliability and certainty for the entire pipe, and including the connection points. To the questions about whether these developments can connect into the existing pipe, from a capacity perspective, no change to our calculations. From a condition perspective, what we've said is that we have new information that gives us reason to believe that the risk is different, and that's what we're bringing to this committee for approval.
It's curious. So, do I understand correctly that the new developments would, shall we say, stress the older pipes? Is that the nature of the problem?
Can I say no? I think there's no stress on the capacity of the pipe. Those developments have to plug into an old pipe. When you're going to affect the connection of the new developments into an old pipe, that is there for that pipe to be stressed, at the age and condition as it is at this point in time. However, can I also reiterate the risk and / consequences assessment is not not just connections. A failure of that pipe or an unconsented discharge carries a very high threshold of penalty. The NRBA sets a ceiling of $10 million prosecution. I'm not saying we're going to be fined for $10 million, but the threshold is very high. The service continuity to those communities of Nongota High and Hamurana can be disrupted to the value of 1,200 cubic meters a day. So the development is just one of the many considerations we're having at this point in time. So I don't want elected members to focus attention onto one element of these consequences.
So you're asking us to approve a new pipe for the new developments. Was that, were those developers?
No, Councillor, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to accelerate the renewal of an existing pipe. Thank you.
Thank you. Stavros has been very clear about the condition of the pipe and the risk that it poses, and the fact that it is a critical asset on a critical stretch of pipe work anyway. Is there any further questions that you'd like to ask?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So these two developers, have they paid a development contribution towards this, or is this all going on to the ratepayer?
Sorry, I think we're probably all trying to avoid this, but point of order, Madam Chair, relevance. Development contributions aren't part of this. This is an existing pipe.
Thank you.
But we're putting a new pipe in, are we not? That's the recommendation.
It's actually a renewal, Councillor Lee.
Can I
Please let Stavros reply.
Very quickly, every renewal element, when we maintain capacity, they will always going to have a significant portion. We're renewing and existing with a new pipe. There is an element of what we call capacity enhancement, which for every pipeline, and bear in mind we've got 250,000 assets in our inventory. Every pipeline will have an element of additional capability, and that flows in eventually into development contributions. I have not calculated at this point in time. We will do it as we review our development contributions policy.
Okay, one further question, if I may. I'm concerned about the precedent this sets. So are we going to be confronted in another 3 months with a similar kind of issue, and then another 3 months, or?
Again, can I go through you, Madam Chair? Can I invite elected members or any of the elected members to read the infrastructure strategy to understand what is the replacement value of our assets, what is the current depreciated value of our assets, what is the condition of our assets, and then obviously from time to time there would be a need to review and modify our delivery timing because of new information arising. I cannot predict it very accurately at the moment how it's going to impact each component. But also, can I remind elected members that we do have at the moment a discussion with our partners with regards to the Rotorua pipeline. And one of the questions arising from that is that will the council effect timely and effective renewal and management of that pipeline so it does not break and adjacent lands? So if we fail to do that here, how do we demonstrate that commitment to timely and effective management of assets to prevent environmental pollution? That's my point.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just add, I appreciate the question about certainty, because I can understand elected members would like certainty. I think what we're facing is a trade-off, as the Chief Engineer said, that if everything gets renewed well in advance of when it needs to be renewed, then the probability of us having a discussion like this about saying, well, the risk has changed, diminishes. However, that doesn't address the affordability concerns that Council places on all of these considerations when you look at the long-term plan. So if the Chief Engineer over the last 2 decades or 3 decades had turned up and said, this is what I need to renew the pipes to be absolutely certain there are no new changes, and they were all approved for the last 30 years, then we'd be able to say with a high degree of probability, no, there's no more of these coming. The challenge we've got is we're operating in constrained resources, and considering affordability, we're trying to prioritize the highest risk investments first. And when the facts change, our advice changes. So I think that's what you're facing here, if I can be somewhat candid about it.
Thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Maxwell.
Before I ask my general question, I'll just give an indication. I'm going to be happy to move the motion later on. But for me, the general question I've got, Stavros, is it's always bugged me over many years. I see the words that asbestos is used in our pipes and everything. Are there no alternatives, and is it something that just doesn't matter?
I would try to stay as not technical as possible. A significant portion of the pipe networks is made with asbestos cement pipes. Those pipes, 70 years ago, they had an expectation of long-lasting material, but obviously subsequent research identified they don't last more than 50 or 60 years. So there are 2 risks with asbestos cement pipes. One is actually the gradual deterioration of the walling of the pipes. They get thinner and thinner. And the second risk, of course, once they collapse, they become problematic in terms of repairing them, because they've got asbestos fibers, and the working crews need to take protective measures to do that. So in general terms, those pipes have a design life of between 50 and 60 years. That design life is embedded into our depreciation of our assets at the moment, the replacement value of their assets, and we factor them into our renewals in our long-term planning processes. But also, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we proactively manage the renewal of those pipes in a way that does not expose our workers, whoever the workers might be, with the undesirable effects of actually having to do with a collapsed asbestos cement pipe. It's hazardous, to them. So the life expectancy is no more than 50 or 60 years, has been documented by a variety of studies, and I don't think there's any way of actually extending their lifestyle cycle.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? There appear to be none. Thank you, Stavros, for your report and your explanations to help us understand the situation fully. Councillors, the resolution before you, or the recommendation before you today, is that the committee notes the identified critical asset failure risks and the consequences of such failure on service continuity as well as on the council's ability to enable housing development in the catchment. And point 3 is that the Infrastructure and Environment Committee approves the reallocation of the annual budgets and the long-term plan for the Parawai Rising Main, specifically to bring forward $2.5 million from 26-27 to 24-25, and to bring forward $2.5 million from 27-28 to 25-26. Do I have a mover? That's Councillor Maxwell, thank you, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll open up for discussion. Did you want to open, Councillor Maxwell, or...?
Thank you. Just briefly, in view of the pipeline failure risks identified in the report, and the proposed housing developments may be delayed if the pipeline renewal is not advanced. Those are some of the reasons, but I think I take on board in the report itself, it also tells us that something like 10 years, I think that's pretty risky for me. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Oh, Matt Hapsell, you had some.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just want to acknowledge that overall the Rotorua Council, through our 30 infrastructure strategies, are doing exceptionally well in terms of ensuring that we have safe and reliable infrastructure, which continues to be a priority for this council. But again, this is another example that we find ourselves in where this council has inherited assets that are at the end of their lives. So this is just another problem that we are having to fix. So we're doing the right thing, I believe, by prioritising investment towards the areas of highest need to protect our environment and protect our people. It will always be a challenge with the limited resource. We never want to push additional costs onto ratepayers, but I'm confident that within the 10 years that we have set out, the budget remains the same, and actually we're just shifting this work forward due to the importance of it. So this comes down to the core of what we do. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are making smart investment, and I just want to acknowledge and thank staff for bringing this before us before it's reached a point where there has been critical asset failure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana o te rā tātou katoa. Thank you, Stavros, again for your report and your team. The risks, like you mentioned, not worth it to me. We need to get onto this quick and fast. I'd also remind my colleagues that, when we first talked about our strategies moving forward and what our priorities are going to be moving forward a few years back now, not one of us disagreed with renewals. We all knew that had to be done. And I don't think we even argued the point on that one because it was such a straightforward and sensible thing to do. And I think let's just remember that and let's get on with it. I think what we've done, I think Mayor Tapsell brought up 2010, maybe that report came out around, maybe got 15 years worth of life. Well, it's pretty close, and I think it's going to be, well, the remedy and what we're going to do we need to sort out so we don't get that risk of anything happening on our watch. And I certainly know around costs too. We're talking about costs. I can't see for the foreseeable close future, near future, of costs coming down for materials, judging with what's going on now. Yep, we're in a bit of a flat line at the moment, but things are still creeping up. So I think let's just bite the bullet here. Let's do what's right do what's sensible. And I would still encourage us to have that conversation that I think it was you, Deputy Mayor Kai Fong, who talked about maybe finding something else to be able to hold back, to offset maybe the pressure, not so much the overall cost, but the pressure that's going to come onto our ratepayers. So with that, I support the kaupapa. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the assessment in 2010 stated that the pipe had 15 years left in its lifespan. It's probably one of our most significant pipes that we have, second only to the new one in Tarawera. I've definitely got no issue with its replacement. It absolutely needs to be done to avoid a calamity. It could be a potentially disastrous calamity out there. However, if we knew this was coming and that 2025 was the deadline, it should have been built into the LTP right from the start. How can our community have any confidence that we can accurately plan when this is coming to us now? That's my concern. But in saying that, it is what it is. We have to deal with it, so I absolutely support it.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I just would like to say that it was in the long-term plan, and it was just the case that when it was...
Sorry, Madam Chair, can you move your mic?
Sorry.
Please?
Not in a big enough voice, sorry. That this project was in the long-term plan. And it's just the fact that this type of pipe degrades over time. It's hard to predict and was just very recently looked at, and that is why it was discovered that it's actually reached a critical point. So it's just changed the timing. I'd just like to add that. Thank you to that commentary. And I'll just move now to Councillor Lee, please.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I think you've just raised a new issue that we hadn't discussed. You say the pipe had been recently examined? Is that in the report? Where is that?
On page 25, it says, during the current progression from concept to detailed design and site risk evaluations for this work, further analysis has been done. Did you have some discussion points, or Councillor Lee?
Yes, that comment's kind of thrown me for a moment.
Shall I move to somebody else?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, you have something to say, thank you, online?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd also like to speak in support of this motion for this project. I think Stavros made a really good point earlier on that, not that long ago when we looked at the non-financial KPIs, that the majority of the infrastructure was in green. And I think if we want to keep it at that, if we want to reduce the risk of these failures, then this is something that is vital towards supporting that. And, I really urge, the fact that I'd much rather know about this than not. And so the fact that this has been brought up and the concern around the condition of it now, especially as it's approaching the end of its life, it's something that I would much rather know than not know, and really be surprised when there could be a failure in place. So I'd much rather us in this position now, front-footing it where we can, and so fully in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving back to Councillor Lee, did you have some points?
Yes, it says there's further analysis has been done, but what is that further analysis? We don't seem to. Do we have any? Yeah, I don't know.
Do you want that question answered?
I just don't think I've got enough information at my disposal.
Stavros might like to add some detail there, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Very briefly, we constantly do two things in our critical assets. We're able, we do CCTV assessments. We set a camera into a pipeline and measure its condition. Where we are not, such as pressure mains, we do core sampling. We drill a small core onto the pipeline and evaluate the thickness, of the remaining life of the pipe. This is work that happens all the time. And that determines the relative priority of assigning our long-term plan or infrastructure strategy and allows us to review those priorities on a constant basis. Core sampling and CCTV work. If elected members, any elected members who wants to actually sit down and observe CCTV, video footage of all these pipelines, they are welcome to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Lee?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Madam Chair, I've been reserving my right as the seconder to respond to anybody against, and if we haven't heard anyone, I suggest we very respectfully put the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I tend to agree. If there's no one who wants to speak against, then we'll move on and I will put this motion. I won't read it out again, but I will ask that if you would take the vote with a raise of hands, please. So all in favour of the resolution in front of us, please raise your hands. Thank you. And against, thank you. And any abstained? Thank you, councillors. On that point, we might actually just break for morning tea, take a 20-minute break until about 25 past, if that's okay with you, and we'll resume again then. Thank you. Everybody. We're now on item 7.3, Major Capital Projects Update, the Stormwater Management IAF program. Could I have a mover and a seconder, councillors, that the report, Major Capital Projects Update, Stormwater Management and IAF program be received? That's Councillor Waru and Councillor Kai Fong. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Just before we move on, I'd just like to note an apology from Councillor O'Brien. I missed his message this morning. He still can't make the meeting, so just note him as an apology on our minutes. Thank you. So
do we need to move anything to that effect?
Yeah. Perhaps we'll put it to the vote. That might be a good idea. I'd ask for a move.
Madam Chair, I've just spoken to Conan. He's on his way in.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
He would still be an apology for lateness.
Yeah, that's correct. So perhaps we'll just move the apology for lateness, please, if you're happy to move that, Councillor Waru.
Oh. Better not, because I was late myself.
Oh, yes, so. Yes. Councillor Lee, and seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. Now we'll just move on to the report, and I'll hand over to Stavros to overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pertinent reports related to the appointment of a Civil Defence and Emergency Controller earlier, and to note that we do have a rain and thunderstorm watch tonight and tomorrow. So this relates to our Stormwater Management Master Plan, which we hope it will give us all a future confidence that we are able to manage those weather events. Madam Chair, if elected members would recall, back in October 2023, we have presented our Stormwater Master Plan, which identifies the risks and the issues that are embedded into our catchments with regards to the current and the projected challenges we will have in managing stormwater for the next 100 years. And again, on the 6th of March earlier this year, again, we had another report on the Stormwater Master Plan. So I do hope that elected members retain some freshness in their understanding of the overall stormwater management processes we engage in. One of the areas where we're addressing at the moment is in the areas of central and western catchments, and especially in the areas that are identified by our Infrastructure Acceleration Fund to provide funding support to gradually implement stormwater improvement systems that will allow us to build about 3,000 houses into those central and western catchments. To enable that to take place, a significant body of work is currently underway, and the report goes in detail on a project-by-project basis and provides you, with some indication as to where those, stages, of the progress are. I think I would direct or ask elected members to have a look at the end of this report on item 7.3 and attachment 1, which indicates the map of the projects. And very briefly, I'll go through and identify that in the western catchment, working through the plan change 2 on the Puke Hanging Hills, we have gradually implemented the Lyndon Park East attenuation project that retains something in the region of 300,000 cubic meters of stormwater for flow balancing towards the Lower Utuhina. We also have identified the Lower Utuhina is performing at the moment under its stated level of service capacity to address the 1 in 100 event period, which we are doing some work in that area to explore options for enhancing the capacity of the Lower Utuhina. We're also working through this project to rectify and identify mitigation options for what we call State Central 3 and 4. Central 3 and 4 is just opposite where Kmart and Mitre 10 are, that area, and also above onto Elizabeth Street. We have identified that a significant risk exists there with rainfall events in the nature of 1 in 20 or 150 or in 100 years that would cause some localized ponding and obviously flooding risk to properties. Concurrently, we're working on what we call Central 5 and 6 and the 8 and 9. And the aim of those works we identified in that map is actually to divert as much stormwater away from the Utuhina Channel and towards the east of the lake to minimize the pressure onto the lower Utuhina, which, as I said earlier, is at the moment under capacity for the level of service stated in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's capability assessment. A lot of projects go through pre-feasibility study. Feasibility study aims to identify whether a project is possible to progress or there are fatal flaws in terms of legal, statutory, technical, or even cultural reasons. And once we go through those pre-feasibility assessment, we progress to preliminary design work, and that design work informs eventually the construction of the projects. We have about $120 million earmarked into this project until 2030, and obviously we aim to satisfy the terms and conditions of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, who provide $85 million in that effect, and we constantly communicate with the IEF officers of the Crown to make sure that as we progress from feasibility to preliminary design and detailed design, it meets their expectations. We're making good progress into that. I also have to be quite frank that some of these projects are very, very challenging, especially as we are retrofitting systems within existing networks. We, in some cases, have to evaluate whether the current conditions of ground conditions, especially when you look into areas like the lower Utuhina, which involves the Ohinemutu area, the geothermal activity will have a material and tangible impact onto the works we propose to do. Kuro Park obviously is underlain by geothermal activity there too, and we have to navigate carefully through the complex issues of managing groundwater levels and tables, because a significant reduction on groundwater levels has got a potential to impact on the geothermal activity balance. If you remove a lot of water from the surface, it upsets the equilibrium or the entropy of the geothermal system. But all these projects that are identified into these reports are all either in the process of feasibility, identifying technical constraints or technical opportunities to improve them, or into detailed design work, and we are making progress in line with the various agreements we've got with the IEF, and the overarching objective obviously is to predict and address flooding risks that arise from current and future events, especially with the climate change anticipation and the ICP model of 8.5. The climate change model of 8.5 obviously anticipates a significant variation to weather conditions, and while we have a model to inform or design parameters for that, it also contains a significant degree of uncertainty, and therefore the capacity of the stormwater systems we are investigating and propose to install over the next 5-6 years, it has to take into consideration to the best of our current knowledge and current ability to predict what will happen in the future. But to that effect, I think financially we are well within our predicted pathway of each individual project. Each individual project has been mapped and agreed by the IEF, and we have to report to them regularly about the achievement of those, projects. Again, reiterate that the overarching objective of the IEF investment is to enable about 3,000 houses. And to give you an example of that, when you look into the construction of the detention dam in the Linton East Reserve, the attenuation of stormwater in that particular park and the protection and of the Lower Utuhina by actually flow balancing, it will enable 500 houses in that catchment to be built without requiring each individual house to have its own attenuation systems. So these are part and parcel of the overall objectives you have in the stormwater in the central and western. And as I said, I will leave it at that. More than happy to take any questions you have with regards to the reports, and conscious of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. I seem to be first cab off the rank. I'll keep them brief. So west on page 37, you talk about West 07. What is the smaller project you refer to there, and what does the Utuhina River Capacity Improvement Project entail, and why does it need ministerial approval?
West 07, it goes all the way up near the intersection of Devon Street and the Utuhina. And it's very difficult to see it, I'm sorry, in this high level, but when you look into the detailed modelling of that area, there's a flows of water coming from the southeast of that catchment, and find a choke point just below the sports dome in that area. And now we are investigating ways of easing the conveyance, enhancing the ability of the water to flow to the Utuhina. The lower Utuhina from State Highway 5 to the lake level, under the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's asset management plan for the Upper Kaituna, it's got a stated level of service to have a capacity to address flows for a storm event of 1 in 100 years. A couple of years ago, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council reported to this council, it wasn't you, it was the previous council in 2022, I think, that the lower Utuhina is not meeting these levels of service. And now we're looking into potentially, is it feasible to dredge some of it? Is it feasible to open up the mouth of the river? Is it possible to enhance, the width, of the stream? And actually this afternoon I'm having a meeting with specialist consultants to give me some preliminary results, to that effect. The minister requires us, when we shifted funding away from the upper Utuhina, initially, if you recall, there was some initial potential stormwater attenuation near the golf course area, and we say, well, it's normal practice to try when you lay a pipe to have the larger pipes at the lower end, at downstream, and reduce the size of the pipes as you go upstream. We should try and open the lower pipe, which is the lower Utuhina. And the minister, we have requested for the minister to agree to a reallocation of that funding to lower Utuhina. Concurrently with that, we're doing work with our partners in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, because they are in control of that asset and they have certain levels of responsibility. And also we will need agreements with communities like the Ohinimutu community if we dredge material, especially geothermal material in the silts. So the minister needs to give us approval to invest money in that instead of somewhere else. So it's part and parcel of terms and conditions for the funding, that every time it's a material change to the progress and the priority of works we propose, the minister has to sign off.
So just another question on that. So if the minister gives us the tick of approval, does that mean there's more likelihood, or we'll have better success with the opportunity to dredge the lower Utuhina and get it back to what it used to be?
Two different things, Councillor Patterson. One is the minister has to consent to the reallocation of the planned funding. And the second thing is a technical assessment, and that's what I'm saying. I'm having this afternoon my first initial report of that, and there are technical parameters to be reviewed. How much silt can be removed, sedimentary can be removed, can be done safely, is the geothermal activity a significant barrier to it? If we achieve that, how much extra capacity you can add to the Utuhina? I don't have the information in front of me at this point in time. But if those prove to be viable and practical, then the answer is yes.
Fingers crossed. So I guess that would have covered the existing constraints and challenges, so thank you for that. Now, later on you talk about the project steering group for the whole IAF. Who's on that?
It's area from our senior management of the Rotorua Lakes Council, but also involves people from the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund who provide the funding. They need comfort and reassurance that the program is progressing online. Right,
and my last question is, who would you consider be the stakeholders in this project?
Everyone in Rotorua are stakeholders, because ultimately the achievement of the objectives of the Stormwater Master Plan, it protects Rotorua from flooding. However, each individual location, Lower Utohina, has got unique stakeholders. Central 3 and 4 got unique stakeholders because they're associated with the area of operations. But in broad terms, elected members are stakeholders, the community are stakeholders, Manawhenua, iwi, stakeholders. So we in every project, as we progress through from feasibility to implement to the design, those stakeholders have to come closer and closer to the detail of the work.
Thank you for confirming that.
Thank you. I'd just like to note, Councillor O'Brien, welcome, and I'm sorry I missed your message earlier this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for lateness and if early departure is required too, so apologies to councillors. I think I'm suffering PSD from last week's meeting.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Lee, who has a question.
PTSD, I think, yes, likewise. Thank you, Stavros. West 07, page 33. The project's original scope on the golf course is no longer proceeding and this project will be renamed. That might have been helpful information to have last week when we were negotiating the club lease. Can you elaborate on that? So that's dead and buried. Will that be needed to be in the lease now?
Might get the CE to.
I'm sorry. I'm not following the question, Councillor. Okay. Sorry.
Is your comment here relevant to the negotiation of the Springfield lease? Is this putting an end to the Springfield Golf Club's use or alternative use as a? I
see what you mean. Look, no, I do not. I don't make that statement. I think. Maybe in a simple language, as I try to explain to Councillor Patterson, when you have to convey water somewhere, it's general good practice to make sure your pipe is at the largest size at the lower end of the downstream, and that's why we're focusing on the Utohina at this point in time. As I again explained to Councillor Patterson, is that it's possible that there might be technical constraints in achieving that. If there are technical constraints in achieving that, and then we go further upstream to see what other things we can do. So without committing myself into a solution that I have not done a feasibility assessment yet, I would not be in a position to say no, any works for stormwater attenuation or improvements in the vicinity of the golf course area are now redundant. I don't have that information at this point in time.
Right, but it's not going to be part of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund and projects?
Well, we have requested the Minister to reallocate the fund in the lower downstream portion of the system, and if that proves to be viable, then obviously there will be less impacts or less effects in upstream. However, if those proves to be unviable, then obviously we have to follow upstream.
I'll just ask the CE to add some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want to be the one to further exacerbate Councillor O'Brien's PTSD from last meeting by bringing it back to this topic, but I can safely assure you that these are unrelated matters.
Did you have any further questions, Councillor Lee?
Yes, one re Linton Park. Is that sort of operational now? We're having a big flood in the next day or so. Is that are we going to be able to see this new dam in action if we take a trip down there?
Yes, it is operational. We're going through the Bay Plan, the Regional Council, some procedural sort of matters with regards to retrospectively consenting the spillway level. But the dam is acting as an attenuation dam at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Councillor Maxwell, then Councillor Kiriopa. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies, Stavros. You partly answered some of my questions that I have at the moment now, but one I've got is what are the ramifications of Bay of Plenty Regional Council's decision not to dredge the Utuhina River? Is Ohinamatu safe?
Well, I think sort of it has been stated by the Plenty Regional Council that they have never dredged the Utuhina Channel. And there is an approach by the Regional Council which they try to treat the Utuhina stream as a natural water course and so on. And the purpose of us actually doing the technical assessment of the depth of sediments, the geothermal activity, the options and so on, is to work collaboratively with the Regional Council to say, if technically it's viable to be done and it will achieve tangible capability, capacity benefits in stormwater management, why not? So we will try and work together because we owe to our community to work together.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions through the chair. The Utuhina was straightened and widened. Do you know the background? It's interesting for me to hear that Bay of Plenty Regional Council say they have never dredged the Utuhina, and yet that's exactly what was done in the, I don't know if it was the 60s, 70s. Was that not Regional Council, to your knowledge?
I believe, thank you, Councillor Curio, but I do believe that the Regional Council undertaken works, my dates might not be accurate, but it probably was in the 60s and 70s, if my memory, I wasn't here, obviously. They've done, what they state is that they have tried to straighten out the Utuhina and do some widening and put some retaining structures on the side of it. What they say is that because of geothermal activity, those interventions were not effective, or efficient, at those times. But again, subject to the technical evaluation I'm doing at the moment, we are trying to work with them to say, well, I don't want to discount further works, but they have never done, according to the statements, they have never done dredging. They've done widening and some retention work, but we're now asking the question, why they failed, if they failed, and what can be done to improve it. And that's where we're at the moment.
Just the CE would like to add something. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to answer your question, Councillor Kiriopa, this is absolutely pivotal for us to get a position from the Regional Council that we believe supports this kaupapa, because it is totally is significantly challenging to proceed to mitigate stormwater in some of the ways we're having to do it, because the options of getting the Utuhina to perform more efficiently don't appear to be available to us at this point. So we're engaging very collaboratively. We're engaging at all levels, and we're engaging with quite significant detail to understand the concerns. But I think it's important to note that at this point, the view Rotorua Lakes Council takes from a perspective of giving homeowners certainty around flood protection of their properties, being efficient about our spend in order to keep the impact on ratepayers down, is quite substantially different from the view Bay of Plenty Regional Council takes at this point. As Stavros said, is we are working together at all levels to achieve that.
So I have one more question. Obviously, for Ohinamatu and Te Koitu residents, the fear is that those communities, those Māori communities at the bottom of the Utuhina are looking at potential managed retreat if those new developments up at Pukehangi are not mitigated. If the viability of these mitigation initiatives that you're trying to get through, if they're found not to be viable, does that impact on the viability of those developments upstream?
Two answers to that. One is that we're acutely aware, and I think on Monday afternoon we had a workshop with our partners of Bay Plenty Regional Council and the Waikato Regional Council actually about the effects of climate change in this room. And we noted that that retreat really should be a very, very last option to that. And we have cited actually the Ohinemutu as a critical mana whenua settlement that needs to be protected. So that's one, we are fully aware of that. Second area, second item, as I said earlier, if the lower Utuhina's capacity cannot be improved, the second fallback position, and that's what I've said earlier, that I'm not discounting upstream interventions yet, because the alternative to open a high capacity in the lower Utuhina is actually to slow down the water upstream. In the Plan Change 2, for example, there is a resource consent condition that requires no more water to flow out of that condition than pre-development. And obviously the Lyndon Park is another attenuation we've done to that effect. If we need to go further upstream beyond the Utuhina upper reaches and create a more attenuation at that level, these are options on the table that we need to consider. So it will affect eventually upstream developments, both in terms of densification and greenfield development. Greenfield development definitely will have to achieve on-site attenuation or retention of stormwater to a level that does not affect the capacity of the lower Utuhina. Intensification is more challenging to do that because obviously you haven't got space in intensification to do that, but you can actually to achieve community attenuation like we've done in Lyndon Park and other potential areas for attenuation. So primary objective to protect downstream communities like Ohinemutu, preferably enhancing the capacity of the lower system to open its channels, open its capacity to flow. And if those are not successful, then move further upstream to make sure that you don't add more stormwater into the system that will endanger downstream properties. So I don't have all the detailed answers to that, but the answer is we have to do that. Sorry? Well, I think we cannot, sorry, I think if we Councillor Kiroba, if we cannot demonstrate that the effects of new land development upstream, say I don't know where, okay, will not be less than minor, then we will not be able to consent this. And I think that's a RMA consideration. Yeah.
Councillor Waru, you have a question.
Kia ora, Te Tiamana, kia ora, Stavros. Totally understanding the kororo around the Utuhina River. As you know, I'm very passionate about trying to get that sorted. But also in the conversations with our regional council partners, has there been any talk about not just dredging the Utuhina, but actually clearing out the Ruapeka, the bay itself as well? Because that has a lot to do with how the water flows as well.
Yeah, the general challenge we put in front of all of us, it's not just the regional council, for all of us, is actually ask some pertinent questions. If we anticipate that climate change, future growth will generate more stormwater flows, and if we anticipate that we're facing an increased risk of flooding in some areas, the system has to be treated in totality. You can't just take just the stormwater pipes on the road. You've got to look into lake levels, the flows of streams to lake levels, overland flow paths, attenuation where it's possible in greenfield development, and really a partnership approach, a constructive partnership approach between the regional council and ourselves is a must. It needs to happen because in terms of jurisdiction and regulation, they have certain responsibilities, we do have certain responsibilities, but nature can't distinguish between the two of them, so the system has to be addressed in all its levels, and we actually put it on the table with our partners to say, we need to work together, we need to look at it from a totality of the system, and then we can do a responsibility apportionment at that point in time.
Thank you, Stavros. No, I concur with that. I totally agree. Got to do it as a whole. I have another two questions there. The next one was around the engagement with, well, whether or not Rotorua Lakes Trust has been brought into the conversation, given their one over the lake bed and the mouth too, I'd imagine. Well, the lake side of it. So, are you able to update us on that?
Yeah, our team, as you know, this is not directed to this project, but it's also associated with that. As you know, we are now going through we've got 37 resource concerns for discharging stormwater, and we're going to consolidate them into one single comprehensive resource concern for stormwater. And our team are working with the Rotorua Lakes Trust environmental team to work together in that respect. When it comes to these large individual projects here too, there's separate discussions that will take place for each individual project.
Kawai, I'm glad to hear that. I look forward to getting an update on what those discussions look like moving forward. The last question I have, thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair, is around the lake levels. I think you briefly mentioned them. Has there been any discussion or any indication, rather, from Regional Council as to the impact that positive impact they could have in terms of what we're trying to achieve, given that they are they manage the lake levels and the flow outwards?
Yeah, we do. Discussions have taken place. Discussions will continue to take place, and also the review of the Rotorua Lakes Strategy Group scope of strategies, and perspective will be addressing it at the same time too. But the answer is yes. Lake levels management is an important component of the system. And maybe at this point in time we don't have a convergence of minds out to that, but we need to continue to work on that direction.
Thank you. And if I could supplement, I know I said one more, but it's just popped into my head now. So if the let's say the Utahina improvement, or whatever we're calling it, that project is successful in terms of the dredging and all that, would it be all in vain if we can't adjust accurately or accordingly the levels of the lake?
Can I emphasize that no one of these projects in here is what I call the silver bullet, for all problems. Every project has got a collective impact into a better outcome. So if we are able to improve the Utahina conveyance capacity, and lake levels are not managed at a level that is consistent with the hydraulic modeling, then a lot of the benefits would be wasted. So really, you need to start from the downstream with lake levels, streams, discharges to the stream, upstream attenuations, and so on. The whole system has to come together as a package, and every component contributes to that.
Thank you, Stavros. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Whose responsibility is it to clear the Utahina stream from fallen trees, which obviously obstruct the flow?
Well, again, that is there is a peculiarity in our legislation. The invert, the channel of streams is owned by Crown. The Purple Regional Council has got stated responsibilities only in terms of its assets, and they have in the Upper Kaituna they've got assets in the Utahina side from the State Highway 5 towards the lake. The streams above the State Highway 5, up to the hills, it's a bit of a grey area, and we actually have tabled it to our partners in the Regional Council. Again, we say, and I concur with you, there's some fallen trees, there are undersleeves, there's erosion, there is lack of riparian planting, there are trees that need to be removed into these channels, and we need to have collectively, again, to agree the system needs maintenance, and if we agree to that, then we decide who's responsible going to be for that.
So nobody knows at present?
Well, at the moment, everybody's pointing the finger at each other.
Thank you.
There was a question from Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, Stavros. Very helpful and very comprehensive. I just wonder, Madam Chair, when does dredging not become dredging? Because in the wake of the Ngongataha floods, and again, forgive me, I'm no expert on these sorts of things, but when you see a digger removing trees from a stream, again, in the wake of the Ngongataha floods, and you see diggers down in the water, and again, no expert, but when you see them digging up dirt and removing dirt from a stream, I just sort of wonder, again, as a non-expert, when is dredging not dredging? Because I see our friends colleagues at our cousin association, in the wake of the Ngongataha protections and mitigations, there's one could almost ask whether that counted as dredging. And so it seems to me if we can do that for Ngongataha, perhaps there's stronger action that could be taken for the Utahina in terms of protecting Ohene Mutu. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts. Any comments from you? On
Oh, sorry. And would you agree with that to turn it into a question? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I think it'd be useful to refer everybody who's interested in this subject matter to the independent review report that took place in 2019 after the Ngongataha flooding. And anybody who's interested will read in that report that parties have responsibilities to mitigate flooding risk, by undertaking certain actions, including what you just described as diggers removing trees. Okay, I don't call it dredging. I call it maintaining the flow capacity of the channel. That's my view.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. I see you've got the illustration in front of you. In that map, you show there's black lines in certain areas across the city. I'm curious to know whether that is related to what we're talking about here, and what does that mean?
Yes, Councillor Brown. This line is what we call a subcatchments that at the moment experiencing the ponding and flooding, and we try to drain them away from these areas. These are sort of target catchments, but by doing that, we actually enabling upstream, housing development, because at the moment these are constraints. The water flows from uphill towards those areas and settles in there, and creates flooding risk to those subcatchment areas. You see some green lines that take to the Utahina, and green lines going across on the east side of the lake. The whole idea is for those catchments to be given an efficient and effective drainage system.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Thanks for the great questions, and thanks for your answers, Stavros. We'll leave that there, I think, for the moment. We'll now move on to the next item on our agenda, thank you, which is 7.4, Major Capital Projects Update, the Museum Project. And I'll invite Stuart to come forward and ask for a move and a seconder that the report, Major Capital Projects Update, Museum Project, be received, please. Mayor Tapsell, and seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried, thank you. Oh, and Thomas, welcome. I'll leave it over to you to review the report.
Right, kia ora koutou katoa. First of all, I'll take the report as written, but just a real high-level overview. The project is progressing well, on time, on budget. We're now currently, although the report's a little bit older now, we're currently in week 14, or halfway through week 14, with 93.5 weeks to go. I guess some of the high-risk items that we've sort of uncovered in this the last few weeks is the removal of tiles in zones 4, 5, 6, so the heritage end. I'm happy to report that the sarking in that area is in reasonably good condition. There are some minor degradation in some areas, but certainly much better than we anticipated. Work has been carried underway currently. The excavation of the lift shaft is complete. We're pouring concrete there tomorrow, and then we'll start to put the ground back together in that space. The performance of Watson and Hughes is, like I said, is on time, on budget. Lots of hard work from the consultants, so they're responding to RFIs very quickly. And even well after hours at night to get the information back to the contractor to make sure we continue momentum. I'll leave it there unless there are any questions from the report.
Thank you, Stuart. Did you want to add anything, Thomas? Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Peterson. And
Thank you, Madam Chair. I said I wasn't going to be the first one, but too late. The sarking you talked about when you were removing the roof tiles, was there any indication that there was any damage to the trusses or any of the joists at all?
No, I mean, the areas that we can see are pretty good. We were able to inspect a lot of that in our early assessment of the building. It'll be more when we get to zone 3, where we're quite a lot higher up, and until we get to that space there, we haven't got to that yet. But certainly in terms of that north end wing of the building, we're in reasonably good shape.
Great, thank you.
any other questions? Councillor Waru?
Yeah, kia ora, Sue. Kia ora, Kōrua. Kia ora, Thomas. Has there been anything, and I haven't, there's nothing to indicate such things in the report, but have there been any things that have popped out of the waterwork, I suppose, that maybe was not accounted for in the initial scope of the project? Any findings, I suppose?
Yeah. No, not at this stage. I mean, if anything, we've had some more positive finds, if anything, particularly around the structural plaster solution. So initially, the spec was for Marpay product to come from Italy. Watson Hughes, through us asking them actually to really interrogate whether there were potential savings and opportunities, found a local product out of the South Island called Rock Bond. That has actually proved to be stronger than what we were required, and so that has meant, you'll see that in the report, where there will be a reduction in the number of collars that we need around the columns. So that's a net gain. Yeah. Great
to hear. That's you know, there's always some solutions around finding things. I think that's a good idea to start trying to, we've got to say where we can, because I have a feeling moving a bit further into the guts of the project, there's going to be some rather large costs that we're going to have to front up with. In saying that, where do you think some of those big costs will start coming in?
We don't know what we don't know right now. At the moment, we have a cash flow plan from Watson Hughes, and like I said, on time, on budget. Until we discover something we don't know, then we won't know that answer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And please do mihi to the boys that are doing the mahi, or the team that are doing the mahi there. I go past there, and they're always on. Kia ora.
Sure.
Councillor Warrior, if I could just add through the chair, we have, as expected, we have had some things, as is in the report, the electrical cable, so that's not literally out of the woodwork, but that is an example of unforeseen circumstances that we are expecting. I'm looking forward to the date on the project plan where we've uncovered everything, because that will be a key date in terms of shifting the risk profile of this project, as I've talked to this committee about in the past. But they'll keep happening, and we'll keep letting you know as soon as we know. Thank you.
Thank you. Ka pai.
Question from Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Just a question regarding the minor delay on the plant room, and that we're waiting for Unison. I understand that Unison are very busy people, and often their work or response is not necessarily timely. So just double checking that we don't expect any major delays waiting for Unison to approve the placement of the foundations regarding the cable.
No, we're not expecting. The plant room is not on critical path. We had, as of a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks for an engineer to review the project, but we've already had a close approach permit issued for the cable. So it's just a matter of them coming across now. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then just one final question regarding the exhibition. I know it is still early days, but has there been any start to applications for additional funding for the exhibition, or do we not expect that to occur until perhaps next year?
No, we've currently got 5 funding applications in, 4 to gaming trusts and 1 to the Ministry of Heritage, the 1 to Lotteries Fund. The Lotteries Fund application, we won't get an outcome of that until December 13th. That was for $500,000. Out of the 4 gaming trusts that we've applied for, we've received less than half approvals for. So we may have to keep going back to these trusts over and over again, but we've had 2 declines. Main reason, oversubscribed from our region.
Okay, thank you, and I wish you all the very best with that. And interesting that the gaming trusts are saying oversubscribed, because we've also had a presentation that there's $2 million unallocated within our area, but we will leave that with you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Tapsell pretty much asked my question, but just to follow on the exhibition commentary, has that stalled, the design work stalled, or have we got enough funding currently to keep it rolling?
The design phase of the exhibition is on pause at the moment, so we've been paused for 1 month. We're anticipating to be paused at least for another month while we wait for some further funding outcomes. But with the balance that we've got out there, I think it's unlikely that we're going to be able to achieve the level of money we require to initiate the next stage, the design stage, which we require about $650,000 for.
Okay. I'll just add as well, we're currently in the process of finalising a terms of reference to form, I guess, I'll use a project steering group, but not quite the right term with regards to having that focus on the exhibition, and we are planning on bringing a paper to Council with recommendations of implementing that going forward, and so that will provide external oversight on your behalf, similar to the group that we have in place with regards to the construction as well.
Sorry, just for clarification, Stuart, the stall that's currently happening, does that delay the opening potentially?
Yeah, and so as part of that paper, we will also give you an update with regards to what the implications are around that. So yes, we're aware that if funding is not forthcoming, it has an impact on that critical path line, but I think it's important that we bring that all together for you at appropriate time.
That's the right answer, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Kaifong.
Chair, just one question. It probably goes into that exhibition thing, but is there enough flexibility within the design phase that we're currently doing now if we wanted to look at a more wider retail offering and channeling people to make sure that they do go through some kind of retail experience before they actually get to leave the museum, so that we can capitalise on income generation?
So part of the terms of reference is, as you know, we gave a presentation with regards to the concept design, is using and leveraging that group around answering all those sorts of questions around the exhibition, the timing, etc. And I think it's important to recognise the report that's in front of you is just on the construction, and we are planning on bringing you a much more comprehensive update around the timelines, in terms of reference of the steering group, and the interaction of the critical pathway, hopefully in the next 2 months.
So there's no need to change any of the construction to accommodate that kind of...
I think, Deputy Mayor, that's, I think when Stuart described that we're in week 14 and a half and we've got 97 weeks to go, that yes, as part of that tail end of that 97 weeks is an overlap with regards to the exhibition, and what we'd like to do is, again, bring you a comprehensive paper into the coming months on that.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, and look forward to that paper. Any further questions, councillors? Thank you.
Just a word of it, just keep an eye on the consultants. Kia ora.
I was actually just going to acknowledge them, actually. They've been giving us very good information on the governance board group. Great to hear from the clerk of works, that's on site every day, every day of the week, which is great. He's got his eyes over things as well, and there's great communication going on by the sounds of it at the moment. That's my take on it anyway. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your report and your answers. Thank you. We'll move on now, councillors, to page 45 of our agenda. It's the Infrastructure and Environment Progress Report. Could I have a mover and seconder that the report, Infrastructure and Environment Progress Report, be received, please? That's Mayor Tapsell and Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. And welcome back, Stavros.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the report, as usual, outlines a range of activities and actions and operations undertaken at the moment. And I would again emphasise that all these actions and operations result in what we call the KPI achievements. But I'll leave it at that, and happy to respond to any questions arising from any items in this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from you, councillors? Councillor Lee, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that's one for me over Councillor Patterson at last. Page 50, the good old Victoria Street upgrade, and I'm interested in how the consultation takes place. So, firstly, do I understand that there's currently a pipe which goes from Victoria Street through the reserve to the wastewater treatment plant?
Correct.
So, the proposal is, or should we say, the Pukeroa Trust is vetoed following that route, so we're going to have to adopt a different route at some additional cost, I assume. What's the process that you go through when you're consulting with the Pukeroa Trust? Is it a phone call? Is there written correspondence? Is there a report? Is it presented to the Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee? How does it work?
In general terms, the consultation and discussion takes place by meeting with people and explaining what we're trying to achieve and what are the views of different people. You're right, there is a pipe going through at the moment through the sanatorium reserved to upgrade the treatment plant, or in the process of being upgraded. But in order to improve the capacity, conveyance capacity within the second line pipeline, and as we normally do, we approach people who have a legitimate interest in the routes of the pipeline, like roads and private properties and reserves, to seek their views. And the process at this point in time is to say it's preferable not to go through the sanitarium reserve, because if there's any spillage, there might be some adverse effects. However, we're looking into an alternative route that follows the State Highway 30A all the way towards the Sala Street lights, and then come down to the treatment plant from parallel to the road at this point in time. So we haven't reached a final conclusion. The preliminary preference is not to go to the sanatorium reserve, but we're exploring the investigations on the other side of the road. So I suppose your question was that, how do we communicate? We talk.
Friendly chit-chat.
Well, it's constructive chit-chat.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions?
I'll leave it there for the moment.
Councillor Patterson, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again, Stavros. Long day for you. Page 15 of your report talks about, mentions illegal dumping. How are things progressing on Mountain Road? Has that new fence mitigated that issue?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think for the moment we seem to receiving less. I can't exactly quantify how much less, but there seems to be less illegal dumping in that area. So we're keeping a watch on that, and we do hope to minimise it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Then we go to page 18, the new toilet block at Puketawhiro Park. I was there when we planted the Pōhutakawa trees, and I saw the drainage, etc., the pipes going in. How long will it be before that is actually completed?
I believe we aim to have it there by Christmas. That's my understanding.
Great. Okay, last question. Talked about tree removals, large dangerous trees. I was rather sad to see the one on Springfield Road come down. Why was that?
Like anything that is made of material, it's got a natural life expectancy. Again, if I may remind elected members, it was 3 years ago, we had an unfortunate storm event that resulted in the death of a lady on Arawa Street, intersection. That resulted into a coroner inquiry, which required council to undertake systematic approach to evaluate the natural health and condition of large trees for the purpose of of safety. So that's what we do. You see a number of large mature trees being removed, and actually in the near future we'll come back to you with some of large trees in Amohia Street in the Central District, because they're coming to the end of the natural or safe life expectancy. So the primary reason is life expectancy. Primary reason is that they reach life expectancy, and that results in safety, and that also results into some damages to utilities in the area. We've got telecommunications ducts, water pipes, sewer pipes, power lines. All these sort of things are form a multi-criteria factor to decide to remove a tree.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 54 of our report regards Tarawera. The flow of agreements to establish locality plans is much slower. Can you give me the actual number of locality plans that are signed up today? Do you know that number?
I believe we have about 60 locality plans signed today, and we've got 195 engagements to meet with the people to sign off.
Sorry, how many were the last?
195 has been dates have been set for the contractor and then to move together, but only less than, I think it's about 60 signed today.
Okay, so one of the other councillors and I attended a meeting in Tarawera on the weekend around that, and the working group was talking about the suggesting that residents don't sign the locality plans, but also stated that that wouldn't hold up work. But could you verify that that's true?
I think two things. The availability of as many locality plans as possible, which means a building consent. It will enable the contractor to smoothly work through the deliver their 21-month term of their contract to deliver 440 installations. So the notion that the frustration of signing locality plans will not hold up the contract is incorrect, factually incorrect. And also the statements I'm aware of that, this is not necessary. It just totally contradicts all our formal communications every month with that community, stating that the locality plans is a necessary prerequisite to obtain building consent. The net effect of that, if the contractor does not have enough signed building consents, the term of the contract will extend, and obviously there will be time delays and cost impositions into the contract.
Okay, thank you. As I thought, and this question's, I think, for the CEO. We made a decision at the last meeting. When will we see daylight on plans on how that might evolve?
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and through you, Madam Chair, if I'll just add a little bit to Stavros' comment. It's important to draw a distinction between the contractor still having work to do and us completing the project in the most efficient way. So, as Stavros mentioned, there are a number of people who we're engaging with about proceeding with work on site, 195, and that's good because the contractor can continue proceeding. However, in order to complete the project as efficiently as possible, we absolutely need those locality plans signed. So there's sometimes two different conversations that get muddled. Yes, at some point we can still continue to proceed without all of them being signed, But if the question is about completing the project in the most efficient way, absolutely, we need them all signed and we need them assigned as soon as possible. So I'll just make that distinction. To answer your second question is, absolutely, Council voted to allocate $2 million. And as requested, we haven't clearly got a funding mechanism with which to bring you some options. So I've been working with the CFO, and we plan in November to bring you to Council a paper on a range of options for how that money could be used to alleviate the private cost to those ratepayers.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions for Stavros? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you again, Stavros, for your helpful report. Just following on from Councillor Brown, on page 54, bottom paragraph of our agenda, staff expect to provide Council with a status update, including any recommended actions arising from property owners frustrating stage 2 process. So if I can follow up from Councillor Brown, would that also be part of November, or are we talking further into perhaps next year for those?
I would expect that certainly you would get some options there in that November paper. Whether that's the final and that's conclusive, I can't yet predict, but certainly we would address this in the November paper.
Thank you. I just wonder, Madam Chair, because I've actually seen emails from people who have been, from residents in Tarawera, who have actually received contacts from the contractors, in some cases quite postponing works, and it's actually come, and I've seen the emails postponing works for various reasons, I'm sure, but I think we just have to be careful that we're not painting everyone in Tarawera with the villain brush, because that's not going to help move this. And I'm not saying anyone here has, but I think we just need to be careful that we want to see agreements and progress on this. So there's no bad guys here. Everyone's trying. People have different opinions, but we're all trying to get this over the line as quickly as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. That reflects things fairly clearly, I think. Thank you. Is there any other questions around the report, councillors? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, Te Tiamana, thank you. Kia ora, no Stavros. You got a lot of work today. Just wanted to touch on the we were at with the Karamutakina kaupapa. I know it's you've given the report there, and it says that a couple of months maybe there'll be an agreement, a relationship agreement to be presented to council. Is there already one in existence in terms of a formal one?
No.
Or is this to take into account the joint consents that we're doing?
Two elements to that. If you, Councillor, were aware here, in August 2022, we entered into an agreement with a report that had been approved by the Council that resulted in the Council agreeing to return some lands to the whanau, to the hapu. That agreement is being given effect now, so it's done. Following the workshop we had where the Karamutakina Ngāti presented their aspirations, I think it was last month, in September, we have said that that was an opening, a presentation, to the elected members. We are now just finalising a report to come to Council, I think, late October or early November, I believe, that says that the relationship protocol will enter with Ngāti Kia, that embraces the aspirations of Karamutakina. We continue to work jointly for the resource consent, as we have agreed back in 2022, and we'll continue to do that. However, there are some short-term small investments to be made to enable the Ngāti Kia to do some forecasting and preliminary, drawing their preliminary expectations for that relationship protocol agreement that we will present to you, who can fund internally for our existing funding allocations. But in terms of larger programs of work that we will consider as part of the long-term plan, the 27, 37 long-term plan. So a report is coming to this council, I expect in the latest, no later than November, to solidify and crystallize that agreement, but we're working jointly with them to put it in front of you.
Thank you, Stavros. And 60% of our central supply.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant.
Yes.
So I'm glad to hear that actually there is a relationship already there.
Yeah.
In a formal sense, it's just a matter of now we're moving into a different type of kaupapa, so therefore we need to evolve that relationship. Thank you. The last question I have is just around, it's a random one too, I think. It's about the, where was it? Let me look it up. Oh, the upgrade to the fencing, behind Sudima there. I think it was, hang on, which is the platform, the viewing platform and all that. It looks great. It's awesome. Has there been any thought in terms of upgrading a bit of that kind of stuff around the Sulphur Point area where the kids sometimes have a hikoi and others too, but in particular our tamariki when they do the education kaupapa through the museum. Has there been any thought to upgrade some of those footpaths and rails, because I think they need a bit of love as well?
Yes, the answer is yes. The timing of them obviously depends on what available resources we've got in front of us, and as the nature of discussions we had earlier, the priorities come in accordance to how much funding we want to put into these projects, but the plan is, there are plans around that, and we'll continue to explore it.
Kapai, I heard a yes, so thank you very much. Kia ora.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Brown mentioned that he'd attended a Tarawera meeting. I'm just curious as to who the other councillor that he referred to was who also attended that meeting.
That would be myself.
Okay.
Yes. It was a well-attended meeting, and
Okay.
there were some good discussions. So it's just, a work in progress.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Thank you. That sort of brings that to a conclusion. Thank you, Stavros. I just wanted to acknowledge you and your team again for the key non-financial performance indicators and the achievement of your team and the work that they do to keep things ticking over so well for our community. Thank you very much. I'd also like to actually acknowledge the councillors from Waikato Regional Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council who joined us in the chamber the other day for the collaborating on climate work. Councillor Jen Nicol, Councillor Kat McMillan and Councillor Winters were here, along with our Rotorua Lakes Council team as well. They were great. We had Craig Goodwin, Alison Lowe and Karen Love here presenting what Rotorua Lakes Council does in this space as well. So it was a very interesting session, and the door is open to some collaboration there around all sorts of issues that we could work together on. So that was just something I'd like to acknowledge. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8. Now, this is the resolution to move into public excluded. Yes, Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if you wouldn't mind, as this is the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, just want to raise that the environment in here, due to our infrastructure, is not so flash. When are we going to get the sound fixed?
That's a very good question. I don't have any, well, unless Greg can provide us a bit of an update. Just hi-ho.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have put an RFS in with the electrician. Sorry. We have put a request for service in with the electrician. We were expecting it to be done earlier this week, but unfortunately that has been delayed slightly. We will get back to you on the timing of that, but we're not expecting it to be too long before that is corrected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the resolution to move into public excluded may not be needed. It's the only item in that section would be 8.1, the confidential minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, and if you're happy to just pass those without moving into public excluded. Yes, says Councillor Waru, if you're happy to do that, and Councillor Wang is happy to second. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour that the minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting held on the 4th of September 2024 are confirmed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. And I'd now like to invite Mayor Tapsell to close our meeting with a karakia, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. kia whakeri ai te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turiki whakataha ai, kia turiki whakataha ai, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Thank you, councillors and staff. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you. At 12:35.